When you Google images of death, this is what comes up. Scary images, dark images. We as a society have been sort of brainwashed to think that death is this dark, scary thing, a deep hole that someone falls into, never to be seen again. Hi, I'm Sandy Alemian, and I'm really glad that you're here. The information that I'm going to share with you has the potential to change the way you look at life and death and everything else in between. For the last 23 years, I've been a spirit medium, and I never thought I would be doing that work until my second daughter Talia passed at 31 days old. And that was the experience for me that completely broke me wide open. And after she had passed, I really needed to understand, what is this thing called death and what happens after you die? And so I went on a journey, and it was a very big spiritually awakened journey. And I found that I had an ability to see and hear and feel things that many people didn't. I had an ability to tune into what I call God and the energy of spirit. One of my most powerful sessions that I had done with a client was a woman whose cousin had passed. And when I connected with her energy and spirit, she actually showed me what it was like being in spirit, what it was like for her to die. And then she shared this. She said, there are 5 truths that you remember when you die. They're embedded into your soul. And I want to share those with you today in this webinar. I'm also going to share with you why we don't remember them now and how you can start to live some of these truths now. Because when you start to live them, what happens is all of your conditioning starts to fall away. Any illusions that you've been living with start to break free. And then what happens for you is you start tuning in to this energy that I call brave heart. It starts to rise. You become a brave heart warrior here on earth, and your life really starts to change. So let me share what those 5 truths are. The first one is this: there is no death. I know what you're thinking, like, oh my God, that's crazy. How could you say that? You had a daughter that died, you had a parent that died. There is no death. So what did she mean by that? Spirit doesn't see death as the end. Spirit sees death as the end of one's physical body, but not the end of who they are. In fact, they've given me an acronym around death, DEATH, which stands for Divine Expansion and Total Healing. So we, as physical beings, we are 2 things. We are this physical body, and we are spirit energy. When someone dies, it's as if they unzip from the physical body and they exist in their pure spirit energy again. So from the perspective of spirit, they see that there is no death. Only thing that dies is the body. From our physical perspective, though, we don't see the physical body anymore, and so we call that death. And it feels like it's the end. I remember after my dad died, he had asked me from spirit to gather everyone in our family at my mom's house before his services. And so we did. There's quite a few of us in our family. And all my nieces and nephews were there, the younger ones. And my dad came through in spirit, and he said this. He said, now remember, when you see me in the casket, remember that's not me. It's just my body. He was wanting everyone to make the difference between who he really was and this thing called his body. Another client of mine, whose wife had passed from cancer, when I was connecting with her energy, she said, please tell my husband, cancer didn't take me, it just took my body. And I'll never forget another session that I had with this woman whose son had passed in a car accident. He said, please tell my mom that when I died, my body stopped, but I kept going. What Spirit wants us to know is that we are not just this body. Yes, this body is the thing that carries us through this physical journey, but that's not all that we are. For us, still when we're in the physical, when we lose someone that we love to this thing called death, it's so hard because we're so used to this physical body. We were used to talking to them and touching their body. We knew that if we saw them in the room, we knew that they were there. And then when someone becomes non-physical energy, it really is very, very difficult for us. as we embrace the idea that there is no death, only death of the body, which means their spirit energy is still with us, as we embrace that, we can start to feel a sense of peace, that their energy couldn't ever die. Spirit has said that that energy, that spirit, that soul energy is the part of every single one of us that cannot be harmed, does not ever get damaged, and does not die. Another client session that I had done, I was working with a woman whose brother was a famous heart surgeon in Boston. I had no idea who he was. When I connected with him, he said something that was pretty powerful. Now remember, his job was to save people's lives as a heart surgeon. And here's what he said. If I knew then what I know now about the world of spirit, I wouldn't have tried so hard to save so many people. Spirit has also come through saying, I love being dead. I know that's kind of crazy to hear, but when they refer to being dead, they just mean I'm out of my pain. I'm out of the suffering. I'm out of the Alzheimer's. They don't carry that with them on the other side. Remember, the true essence of who someone is doesn't ever, ever die. We, on the other hand, struggle with this concept of death. You'll remember it when you die, that nothing dies but the body. But here in the physical presence, we struggle with this concept of death. And because we struggle with the concept of death, we also struggle with the second truth that's embedded with your soul. And that's this. There is no time. From our physical perspective, yes, of course there's time. We have clocks, we have watches, and this is how we keep track of daily events and weekly events and yearly things. It's how we keep track of our age and our birth dates and anniversaries. On the other side, from Spirit's perspective, there is no time. They have so often said that when we see each other again, it's like no time has passed. And from Spirit's perspective, they always are encouraging us to live in this moment. They say that there's no time, that there's no thing called the future. The future is an idea in our minds. If you ask a dying person about time and what to do with it, it will be a very, very different response than if you ask your monkey mind, the chattering part of your mind that's going to list a whole slew of to-dos. My dad in Spirit also said, Sandy, slow down and enjoy life. No one ever dies with it all done. Spirit sees time so very differently. They've shown me that when they go through a life review, it's like all the memories have been stacked and they can experience a memory, but they see it so clearly. They see it so different. They see it from the eyes of God. We, on the other hand, look at our memories, and some of our memories will hold pain, and it's almost as if we're stuck in time. Here's an interesting concept about time. Your body really doesn't know the difference whether something happened 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago. If you were to think of a painful memory, your body would respond as if it's happening right now. Your imagination doesn't know anything about time. Your imagination is here in this moment, right here, and right here, and right here. And that's why a lot of sports athletes will use the power of the imagination for success. When they imagine themselves succeeding, their body feels what success feels like. There's muscle memory that's there. Another interesting thing about this concept of time, I want to share with you a story. There was a story about this artist who was in the studio and was planning on working on this painting all day long, and a visitor came to the door. And he said, you know what, I'm going to be working all day. I'd love to talk to you, but can you come back in 4 hours and then we can talk? And so the visitor left and this artist kept painting. And about 45 minutes later, gets a knock on the door and it's the visitor back again. And he said, I thought I told you to come back in 4 hours. And the visitor, his friend, said, it's been 6 hours. Think about when you are fully enjoying your life. It's like time doesn't exist. And I wonder what effect that has on the body. I wonder. The artist thought 45 minutes had passed, when in quote unquote real time, 6 hours had passed. How much did his body age during that time? 45 minutes because that's what it felt like? Or did his body actually age 6 hours because that's how much time went around on the clock? Speaking of the body, our bodies are so wise. Your body knows exactly when it's hungry. It knows when it's full. It knows when it's time to wake up. It knows when it's tired. But what do our minds do? Our minds override that. So we might eat when we're not hungry, or, okay, I'm talking about myself here, or we might, push through something when our body just wants to rest. Your body doesn't understand time. It's a mental concept. And when we're in spirit, there is no concept of time. There's no measurement. So we can start listening to our body instead of the clock. And I wonder what that would do for your sense of vitality. I imagine it would skyrocket. People have often said, time heals all wounds, whether it's something physically or emotionally. I don't agree with that. Spirit has said, time doesn't heal all wounds. It's love and truth that heals. I've worked with clients that have held on to a traumatic pain for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. There's been a lot of time and distance between the traumatic event or a loss and where they are now. But healing hasn't happened because it's not time that heals. If it were just time that healed, we would all be walking around free of any wounds from childhood. What really heals is the energy of love. What came through my writing recently was, there is a wound inside of each and every one of us that only the divine can heal. And when we come into alignment with that divine force, healing can happen like that in no time. You may have heard of Anita Moorjani. She wrote a book, Dying to Be Me. I love her story. It sort of proves this point that there is no time when it comes to healing. Now, Anita was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer, and she ended up in the hospital. There was nothing left that the doctors could do. Her body could not tolerate any more treatments. She was down to about 80-something pounds, and she ended up going into a coma for 3 days. When she was in that coma, she was in spirit, so she was fully aware of her soul essence. Her body was laying in a hospital bed, motionless, but her spirit was very much alive. And when she was in this coma, in spirit, she was with her dad that had passed. I think it was her best friend and her cousin and her stepfather. And her dad said to her and showed her, you've lived most of your life with this energy of unworthiness. And that's what's co-created this dis-ease in your body. Now, when she was in that space with her dad and her soul and her spirit energy, she started to feel this unconditional love that is embedded in each and every one of our souls. She didn't want to come back. But they said to her, it's not your time. You can't stay here. But if you go back into the body, remembering this unconditional love, your body will heal. If you don't, if you go back into the body with the same unworthiness concept, your body will continue to deteriorate. And so she made an agreement. She decided she was going to come back into her body, meaning out of the coma, with this sense of unconditional love. The beautiful thing is, her body healed completely. There was no hope for her. But when she aligned with unconditional love, it had such a beautiful impact on her body that time couldn't explain. So that leads me to the third truth. that you remember when you die. And it's this: there is no unworthiness. Now, I know what you're going to say. Sandy, you don't know what's happened to me in my life. And believe me, I understand. I've dealt with unworthiness for a good part of my life because I had an idea that I wasn't enough. I always compared myself to my older sisters. And for some reason, in my own little mind, I felt like I wasn't enough. Spirit has shown me that when you die, you again release yourself from all of the stories and you are in full awareness of your beautiful, beautiful soul essence, which is an essence of God. So where does all that unworthiness come from? Probably your childhood. What happens is we were not born unworthy. We were born as this vibrant being. And then you go through experiences in life and that inner child starts to believe a story that usually sounds like, I'm not enough, maybe I'm not worthy, and then it carries that story throughout life. It doesn't challenge the story because it doesn't know how to. And that becomes part of our ego. The ego is the part of us that separates ourselves from the idea of God. In the eyes of the world, we may not measure up in some way, shape, or form. Social media I think, is a big way that we all can have a sense of feeling not worthy or not enough or not good enough. Maybe we don't have enough likes or shares or views or whatever that is. When you're plugged into the world out there, you will probably feel a sense of unworthiness from time to time. When you tune in to the vibration of God within, you remember how loved you are and how worthy you are. In the work that I do with my private clients, if someone is struggling with an issue that they've had around unworthiness, sometimes we'll bring God into the session, if they're open to it, and I'll have my client imagine God right there with them and turn and face God and ask God directly, am I worthy? Have I failed? And not once has God ever said to any one of my clients, no, you're not worthy. Or, yeah, you've failed. Not once. But you see, we tend not to ask the divine for answers. We tend to go out there for our answers. So if you're asking the world, am I worthy? You'll get 100 different answers. When you tune in to the divine within you, you'll get the truth. And the truth will always set you free. So when someone passes, even if they've had a lifetime of unworthiness, if they've had a lifetime of depression or anxiety, if they've had a lifetime of confusion, in spirit, it's all clear. In spirit, they know who they are. In spirit, they know that they are an energy, a frequency of God. It's just here, we have a tendency to forget, and I'll show you how you can start remembering. So the voice of your ego will always tell you why you're not worthy. It will bring up memories from the past. And that voice of the ego is constantly chattering for most of us. I call it the monkey mind. And it will give you so many reasons and all of this proof of why you're not worthy. But there's another voice inside you that you can start to listen to, and it's the voice of your soul and the voice of God. And it will give you a whole different story. One that will feel a whole lot better for you. What also feeds into our unworthiness here in the physical realm is that we have a tendency to focus on what we don't have. We have a tendency to focus on lack and scarcity. And that brings me to the fourth truth that you remember when you die. And that's this: there is no lack. So, it depends on where you're looking at this from. These are all truths from spirit. Now, your humanness can certainly probably see different areas of your life where there's lack. If you don't have a relationship in your life, you'll say to me, Sandy, I'm lacking a relationship. If your funds are low in the bank, you'll say, Sandy, I'm lacking in finances. And I get it. I've been there. And it's so easy for us to see what's missing. In spirit, nothing is missing. In spirit, there's no measurement of money. There's no measurement of love. Because in spirit, we are one with the source of all, and there is nothing missing. So why do we feel so much lack here? It's because we're plugged into the outside world for our identity, our safety, our security, and our sense of well-being. That's what keeps us perpetuating the story that we don't have enough or that we're not enough, that there will never be enough. And then you can see how lack shows up. Here's what I wonder for you. I wonder if you're telling yourself the same story of why you don't have what you really, really want. The same story again and again and again. Maybe it's a story about money. Maybe it's a story about relationships. Maybe it's a story about health. When you're honest with yourself, you might see that it's your thinking that's holding the lack. It's not in your soul. It's not in your spirit. It's in your thinking. So how does that happen? How is it that we're seeing lack because of our thinking? Let me share this with you. Every time we have a fear-based thought, it's like there's a shutter that closes around our heart. Now, the divine will move through your heart and pour abundance through your heart, through your open heart. And if you have fear-based thoughts, if you have scarcity thinking, that's going to close up your heart and constrict your heart. And then the divine can't come through your heart with an abundance of love and abundance of everything that you need because your heart will be closed. These truths can open your heart so that you can feel a sense of abundance coming into your life. So remember, fear is going to close and constrict your heart. Truth is going to open your heart. It's like a shutter on a camera, right? Picture the shutter on a camera. If that closes, light can't come through the shutter. And so if you were to take a picture and the shutter was closed, all you would get is a dark image. When the shutter opens, light can come through and you have a completely different picture in front of you. Spirit has also said that when you turn your back on the divine, when you turn your back on that light, the darkness that you see in front of you, the shadow that you see, is because you are getting in the way of the divine. And this brings me to the last truth, which I think is the most important truth of all. And the last truth that you remember when you die is you are never, ever separate from God. This was imprinted, all of these truths were imprinted on us at birth. And yet our experiences throughout our lifetime have taken us away from these truths. You can use the word God, you can use the word source, higher power. When I use the word God, I reference a power that is greater than me. The energy that encompasses all my light, all of love, all that is. I happen to call it God. One of my clients had come to see me and he said, Sandy, I want to know, his father had passed, and he said, I want to know, was God talking to my father when he was in his coma? So I connected with his dad, and his dad said this. It was so beautiful. He said, please tell him that not only was God talking to me when I was in my coma, God was talking to me from the moment I was born and never stopped. I just didn't know how to listen. I think that's at the core of so many of our problems, is that we're not listening to this loving presence. We're listening to the mind chatter. We're listening to the world that's been feeding us fear. In my life, whether it was going through the loss of my daughter, going through divorce, bankruptcy, relationship issues, it was the energy of God that for me got me through every single time. And I learned 23 years ago how to have these really, really powerful conversations with God. I've written 2 books, Congratulations, It's an Angel, and What Was God Thinking? And those have my conversations with God in them about different subjects. And one thing that I know to be true, it's that I'm not special because I have a conversation with God. I think these conversations are incredibly special, but I know that each and every one of us has the potential to tune in just like I do. And I have to tell you this, because I'm a medium and because I have these amazing conversations with God, it doesn't mean that I'm spared from challenges in life. It doesn't mean that I don't go through fear. I do. But what I do that's different is I have all these tools which I want to share with you on how you can tune back in so that you can move through the problems in your life with a greater sense of ease. So here's what happens when we feel separate from God. Well, first of all, you can never be separate from God, but you can feel separate from God. When you feel separate from God, you're feeling like you're trying to do everything on your own. It's kind of what I was doing for a long time. And you end up becoming what I call a fixaholic. You try and fix your relationships, you try and figure everything out, you try and fix the world so that you can feel a little bit better. It doesn't really work that way. When you remember that you're never separate from God, you start to access a power that was always with you, but you didn't know that you had it. Your life starts to flow with greater ease, and that starts to reflect into your finances, into your relationships, into your work in the world. It's one thing to hear about these 5 truths that you'll remember when you die, and they're great concepts. But I don't want you to leave this webinar just saying to yourself, wow, I can't wait until I die so that I can experience all of that. I don't want you to wait for that. I want you to learn how you can start not just knowing these in your heart, but really living them and experiencing them. That to me is what it means to live as a brave heart. A brave heart to me is one who knows that they are connected to the divine and that the divine is working for them and wants the best for them here. A brave heart is someone who knows their gifts and is here to share them with the world. So if all of these truths are embedded in our soul, and we are a soul energy having a physical experience here, why is it that we're not remembering them in our day-to-day lives? It's because we get so distracted by our conditioned beliefs. We get distracted by our experiences in the world. And those conditioned beliefs start from a very young age. As a youngster, you went through certain experiences, and from those painful experiences, you started developing a story that might have said, I'm not worthy, I'm not enough, maybe it's my fault. And when you have that story going on, you have all these emotions that come up from that story: fear, worry, angst, frustration, or anger. And there's a mechanism that happens inside of you that wants to protect that. It wants to protect the vulnerability. And because you probably don't want people to see what you're feeling, that's when we start putting layers on all of the emotions. Perhaps we develop a persona or a personality in the world. We develop a mask that we want to show to the world. This is how we want people to see us. And yet inside, there's a different story going on. And it's almost as if our soul is calling forward experiences to help us to see what we're really holding on inside so that we can heal them. And so sometimes our soul will call forth an experience to break you open a little bit. Maybe it's a divorce, maybe it's a financial change, right? And when you start getting broken open a little bit, some of that emotion starts eking out. But what happens if you're not knowing what to do with those emotions? You put another layer, another protective layer on. But think about it. You've got all of these layers, right? All of these layers over these emotions. And at your very core is this amazing soul energy that just wants an expression here. That soul wants to express its light here in the world. And so what then happens is life gives you another opportunity and you might be broken open even more. As hard as it is, being broken open can be one of the biggest gifts, because when you are broken open, it's sometimes then that you come back to one of these truths that are embedded in your soul. And if you feel like something is broken, if you feel like something is not working right now in your life, I want you to know that I'm here to support you. Here's what I know to be true about you. No matter how many layers you have, no matter how much protection you have, no matter how many masks you've worn, I know deep down inside of you is a beautiful, beautiful light. Spirit has said that God is the sum total of all of our light. And my mission here is to help you remember, and not just remember, but to help you to start living and really embodying all of these truths. That there is no death, there is no time, there is no lack, there is no unworthiness, and you are never ever separate from God. So thank you so much for being here. I so look forward to serving you. Much love to you.